The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Thursday, January 26, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. I have been covering the banning of AP African American history by Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida for some time now. And I want to circle back with yet another goal of his. Now, we understand Ron DeSantis, Ron DeWeasel, has a very consistent MO. He stirs culture wars for the purposes of deflecting from what he's actually doing to harm the people of the state of Florida. Now, again, I have to put a pin here because we cannot minimize the reality of Ron DeSantis's racism. He is deep down to his core, in his bones, a devout racist who taught pro-Confederate and pro-slavery lessons as a history teacher in Georgia. Now, he is also very strategic, and he understands he can get a 2-for-1 in what he's been doing, in addition to what we covered yesterday with the defunding of public schools, redirecting the vouchers to private institutions and to religious schools. He is also getting ready to allow millions of Floridians to lose their Medicaid coverage. As I said, it's always a 2-for-1 with Ron DeSantis. In this case, it's a triple double. According to the Miami Herald, thousands of Floridians could lose Medicaid coverage soon. Almost 1 million Floridians are slated to lose their Medicaid coverage starting in April once the federal COVID-19 emergency comes to an end. Florida is just one of 11 states that did not expand Medicaid through the Affordable Care Act, which means tens of thousands of Floridians are expected to fall into the Medicaid access gap. This gap occurs when families have incomes that are above the state's eligibility for Medicaid, but are below the federal poverty line. These people will not be eligible for Medicaid or for coverage within the Affordable Care Act marketplace. And again, this is in addition to what he's doing to the public schools, and in addition to the fact that he raised taxes on Floridians, all while giving benefits away to major corporations like Publix grocery stores. You will recall that one of Publix's heiresses, one of the daughters of the Publix empire, is a major contributor, or was a major contributor, to what happened on January 6th. These things are all interconnected. There is a mass movement of conservatives, Republicans across this country, who are 100% committed to draining the government of every public dollar and redirecting it to private enterprises, to religious institutions. They intend on defunding schools all across this country. We saw it in Iowa. We're seeing it happen now in the state of Florida. And they are committed to eviscerating any type of benefit to the average citizen. They would rather see you die than to allow you to get Medicaid coverage in the state of Florida or anywhere. For any state, there was 11 states that refused to expand the Medicaid coverage. So it's not just the state of Florida. This is part and parcel of what the conservative movement is about at its core. Consider the state of Mississippi, where the poorest state in the United States of America. If you've not seen poverty until you've seen poverty the way it exists in the Mississippi Delta, consider the fact that they have redirected funds that were set aside for poor people, for welfare recipients. They redirected those funds to their friends, to their favorite athletes like Brett Favre. Take a listen to this reporting from HBO Sports as they interviewed Mississippi State Auditor Shad White.
What I can tell you is that this is the largest public fraud case in the history of the state of Mississippi.
Did you have any sense when you took the case of what you were wading into?
No, absolutely not.
What White learned, he says, was that here in the poorest state in America, money from the state welfare fund intended to help alleviate poverty was instead being rerouted by those in charge to their cronies and friends, nearly $100 million in all.
the folks who were making the spending decisions were acting as if there were no consequences here, that there were no real rules around this money. They thought of this fund as not only their own fund to do what they wanted with, but they thought of it as a slush fund that no one was watching at all.
And that's just one state. That's Mississippi. That is $100 million worth of welfare funds that were redirected to the likes of Brett Favre and his daughter's volleyball gymnasium.
White began to look into a string of odd payments from a state welfare program called TANF, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Among them, a payment of $5 million to a project being spearheaded by a man with a familiar name, Brett Favre. It was a project that didn't seem to be assisting needy families at all. A brand new volleyball arena at the Mississippi college where Favre's daughter played on the team.
It is clearly a volleyball court built at a time when Mr. Favre's daughter is there, and you can't spend money intended for the poor on something like that.
Except they did do it because conservatives have a fundamental belief that all of the wealth that is generated in this country belongs to them. They have a fundamental belief that poor people are here to be exploited and to have wealth extracted from them. They only believe that we're good for labor. That's it. And this is the MO of conservative governors all across this country, conservative representatives in Washington, D.C., senators, all of them. They fundamentally believe that they have the right to dismantle every single project, every single program that would potentially benefit the poor. Meanwhile, they get the added bonus, the added luxury, the added racist luxury of being bigots, of stirring the pot with the most ridiculous racism that they can conjure up, banning AP African American history, knowing full well that it will create the ruckus necessary to distract from the reality that they are exploiting the American people. They are fleecing their citizens of their respective states like nothing we have seen in our lifetimes, and they're able to get away with it because we're certainly in a post-truth, post-fact society where everything can be dismissed as fake news. So long as a politician can survive a presser, so long as they can get up there and grandstand and make it seem like all of the reasonable questions being asked about their programs, so long as a governor can get up there and pretend as though he's offended. That's what Ron DeSantis does so well. He acts as though he is so offended by the accusations that are coming from journalists, when in reality, he is literally doing everything he is being accused of and then some. He is a racist, but he is also emptying the coffers of the state of Florida on behalf of his cronies and his friends. And he's not alone in this country. There are Republican governors in many states who are doing the exact same thing. American democracy continues to be under attack from many directions, two of which we are focusing on in this show with a laser-like intensity, because it is extremely important that we understand the role of religion in what is happening right now in our country, along with the role of technology and how people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, and their algorithms have the ability to not only push people down the rabbit hole towards fascism, but also gives rewards to those who spread misinformation. We are living in a full-blown psychological operation, as Jim Stewartson said on the show earlier this week, a full-blown psyops, a very long and sustained operation against democracy that is coming in multiple forms, including the rise of theocratic fascism and the technocratic fascism that's coming as a result of Elon Musk and all of his counterparts. I want to lean in on the religious conversation. There's an article by Catherine Stewart in the New Republic entitled "The Rise of Spirit Warriors on the Christian Right: How an Extreme Transformation in American Religion Poses an Existential Threat to Our Democracy." I'll read a bit of it for you in a moment, but I just want to kind of categorize the article as a very well-researched outline of key figures that we should be watching and the role that they have in the rise of this theocratic fascism. It's no longer a single character. And this is what I believe America is getting wrong with their laser-like focus on Donald Trump. Yes, Donald Trump is a problem. Yes, he should be tried. Yes, he should go to jail. However, the key players who are pushing this country closer and closer to a theocratic fascist state where religious beliefs would become law, where people would be punished because we have lifestyles that white evangelicals don't approve of. And whether you're gay, straight, whatever, if you're black and you're a Christian and you like myself, pretty square, pretty, conservative guy in my personal life. But the mere fact that I stand up for justice and the mere fact that I stand up on behalf of other people, they're coming after me too. Okay. And this article is brilliantly outlined, showing the many different players, all of whom have large media platforms, preachers who are out here declaring that they are fighting against demonic Democrats, who are fighting a spiritual warfare against the rise of the liberal elitist cabal of groomers, this language, this insidious and inflammatory language that is intentionally designed to stir their audience and push them into action. That action oftentimes manifests itself in violence. The actions that are to come, we could rest assured will be violent, because violence is a part of what they're prescribing as a solution to the LGBTQIA community, as a solution to the woke left, as a solution to Antifa. These are pastors all across the country by the dozens, probably into the hundreds, who use their media platforms every single day of the week to pump out the exact type of rhetoric that has moved other nations into full-blown dictatorships. Later on in today's episode, I will be playing a clip from an interview that Stephen Colbert did with journalist and Nobel Peace Prize winner Marissa Nessa, as she describes how what happened in her home country of the Philippines is happening right here, and how it was that the religious fervor in conjunction with social media helped lead many nations into full-blown dictatorships. I will leave a link in the description to the article over at the New Republic by Catherine Stewart. Again, the title is The Rise of Spirit Warriors on the Christian Right, How an Extreme Transformation in American Religion Poses an Existential Threat to Our Democracy. And she writes the following: this idea that the American political realm is a place of spiritual warfare in a literal, not metaphorical sense is one of the defining elements of the new forms of highly politicized religion that are surging across the country. Some, but by no means all, of the figures claiming special vision into the demonic struggles of our times are associated with the neo-charismatic movements, the New Apostolic Reformation, or the NAR. Again, this is Catherine Stewart over at the New Republic. She continues and says that the NAR's vision of modern-day apostles and prophets, spiritual warfare with demons and territorial spirits, and the ideology of the Seven Mountain Dominionism, which says conservative Christians are to take control of the seven key features, often referred to as mountains or molders of culture, including government, business, media, education, entertainment, family, and religion. The NAR is perhaps the most extreme representative of the Pentecostal movement's offshoots, but some of the same patterns of thought and expressions popular amongst Christian apostolic and prophetic movements are gaining traction amongst those who identify with other religious movements and denominations. I want to pause there and remind you of the interview that I just did with journalist L. Hardy, who we discussed this at great lengths. This is how you get people who don't identify as Pentecostal, so long as they use the language and the methodology of Pentecostal preaching, and they couple it with the rhetoric of conservative right-wing evangelicals, the rhetoric of the woke left, or the rhetoric of pro-Trump or anti-vaccine messaging. They become a part of this movement, even though they don't identify as either apostolic or Pentecostal. So long story short, the denomination doesn't matter so much as the language and the rhetoric that is lumping all of these many different denominations, different institutions of different varying ages, how long they've been here. Some of these Pentecostal churches have been here for since 1906, since the Azusa Street Revival, which, by the way, was started by a black man. Another thing co-opted by white supremacy and then pushed now into the 21st century as the tool of not only white supremacy, but sedition and treason. They're using the language of God to overthrow democracy. Now, I have to put a plug here for all of my fellow Christians who identify as Pentecostal, particularly the black Pentecostals, from which my father was Baptist, but he used to call himself Baptist-costal because we had a Baptist theology, but we had church. And we praised God. We had the organs and the drums, and we set it off in the sanctuary like better than any Pentecostal church could ever hope to. So there is a very diverse group of Pentecostals who actually adhere to liberation, who are not aligned with these theocratic fascists. Not because they don't see eye to eye on some conservative issues. It's not. Let's be real. I talked about it yesterday. There's a lot of black folks who would be Republican if not for Republicans' racism, right? But there is a very rich history of liberation theology that runs through the Pentecostal church because it was started by the son of a former slave, of a freed slave, right? Of a free enslaved person. Let me correct myself. But the very Pentecostal movement that has been co-opted by white supremacy and for the purposes of sedition started off diverse and inclusive to the point where it was condemned by the system. This is why you should read the article by Catherine Stewart. Let me read it to you in her words. She put it succinctly. On a warm California night in April 1906, William Seymour, a 35-year-old traveling preacher whose parents were emancipated from slavery, along with 7 friends, was waiting to communicate with God when suddenly they all fell to the floor as though they had been hit by a bolt of lightning, she put it in quotation marks, and began speaking in tongues. The Azusa Street Revival, named after the street in Los Angeles where the event took place, was explicitly multiracial and gender inclusive from the start. Not surprisingly, it was considered wildly unorthodox by many prominent white theologians. An article in the Los Angeles Times condemned the, quote, disgraceful intermingling of the races. And then by 1950, the Azusa Street Revival had lost much of its momentum, but it eventually powered an extraordinary rise, a new branch of Christianity called Pentecostalism. That Pentecostalism has been co-opted, weaponized. The methodology of the black preacher, you can see this with Paula white supremacists, as I call her, the co-option of the method of the black preacher has been now used to stir the racist, treasonous white folks in this country who want to turn this nation into the Republic of Gilead. So the fact that they're using the language of God to actually accomplish their coup is not surprising as a matter of historical, as a historical phenomenon. We understand the perfect marriage between the two, and they are almost getting away with it. They are very close to successfully overthrowing this country, because how do you stop someone's religious right to organize and to push their audience into action? You simply can't stop that. Or rather, let me correct myself again. We can't stop them from professing their stochastic terrorism that's wrapped in religious jargon. We can't stop them individually from exercising their rights, but we can most certainly educate the masses as to what's happening. And we most certainly have to educate and mobilize the black liberation tradition in response to it. If the black church, and as well as any other, I don't care what race you are, so long as you listen to and believe in the liberation theology, if that group of individuals don't stand up and show these white supremacists who wrap themselves in a flag and a cross, if we don't stand up to them, then there quite literally will not be a comparison, a juxtaposition for the people to see. And there will be more individuals who fall for the insidious religious rhetoric of individuals who have number one, been co-opting Christianity since Constantine the Great. Number two, have most certainly used it as a bludgeoning tool against every single person that's not a white, straight Christian man, conservative person. And if we don't stand up and do something about it, we will find that all of us, whether we believe in God or not, so long as we don't believe exactly and precisely what white supremacy believes, then we'll find ourselves all the victims of white conservative Christian supremacy.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Yeah. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I want to play a clip for you from the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He was interviewing journalist and Nobel Peace Prize Award winner Maria Nessa. She has been wanted in her own country, her home country of the Philippines. She's wanted for standing up to Rodrigo Duterte, to authoritarianism, to a dictator. Her book is actually called that, How to Stand Up to a Dictator. I want to play this particular clip because as much as I've talked about theocratic fascism being an explicit and threat, an existential threat to democracy, social media, these social media giants play a huge role in its propagation. I mean, the reason it spread so far and so wide is because of social media and the fact that social media, the algorithms, reward misinformation. It rewards the lies. Now, it's not in this clip, and I'll let you hear from her in a moment, but in another interview that she did with PBS NewsHour, she put it like this: social media rewards the lies laced with anger, hate, and fear. They get the greatest rewards. That's exactly what's happening on Twitter right now with Elon Musk. And this is what happened to the Philippines. Listen to her as she describes the role and the culpability of social media in the rise of dictators across the globe.
So how are those two connected? Authoritarians or dictators and social media companies, how are they connected in ways that perhaps we don't often think about?
One enabled the other. You know, there's a reason why 60% of the world today is now under authoritarian rule. The number of democracies globally has been rolled back to 1989 levels. In 2016, I stood up and I said, we demand an end to impunity on two fronts. Rodrigo Duterte, our president in the Philippines, his brutal drug war. And the second is Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook. Because in the end, what happened in the Philippines would not have happened if Facebook wasn't there. 100% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook is our internet. And, you know, I guess this is the other part. In 2016, I said, America, look at us. What is happening to us is coming for you. And when I saw January 6th happen, violence on Capitol Hill, something we have never seen before, but the same methodology, bottom-up social media, lies, a fact, you know, becomes a lie, or a lie said 1,000,000 times becomes a fact, so you can't distinguish.
A lie said 1,000,000 times becomes a fact, so you can't distinguish it. This is literally what we're going through right now. If you think about COVID-19 and the fact that we who still wear masks, we who are getting booster shots, who are still trying to protect ourselves, we're seen as the ridiculous ones, right? That's because the lies that have been pushed from the bottom up from social media and then regurgitated from the top down, as she begins to describe later on in the clip, we're getting lies from every direction, but it's amplified, right? The reach, the dissemination of the lies spreads so much more quickly because of social media and the fact that the algorithm prioritizes and profits these individuals. The largest performers on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook are quite literally disinformation agents. They are spreading lies to the point where people who may not be able to pay attention to every single detail start believing it. This is causing the fracturing of our society in the United States of America, and not causing, we are in the full-blown fracture. We're in the stage of decline in this country, partly because of how social media has amplified lies to the top.
3 sentences I've said repeatedly since 2016. If you don't have facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we have no shared reality. We can't solve any problems. We have no democracy. That's what social media has done. It has come in and used free speech to stifle free speech.
My God, did she not diagnose our situation just perfectly? They have come in and used free speech to stifle free speech. In the name of free speech, Elon Musk purchased Twitter, and now he is suppressing the speech of his political rivals, the left, while amplifying the speech of white supremacists and Nazis. This is, and even furthermore, what she said about the splintering of reality, how we don't have a shared reality anymore. We don't have a common set of facts. And in the absence of a common set of facts, it's all but impossible to have a democracy. Now, when you couple that with the fact that there are financial rewards and incentives for more and more individuals to buy into and begin to spread this misinformation as if it's a one big game, a big game where they get rewarded handsomely, you see more and more people jumping in to get as big of a piece of the pie as they can with their misinformation. And the more salacious they are, the more ridiculous they are, the more anger they can foster and foment, the more rage that they can gather up, the better they perform, the better they do. Look at Tucker Carlson. I mean, he's at the top of the heap, but it goes from top to bottom, bottom to top. Look at all of the wannabes that are out there who are 100% committed to the disinformation because that's how they pay their bills.
That's the biggest problem, is that all of a sudden our public sphere is governed by an economic system we didn't even have a name for. Now, in 2019, it was named by Shoshana Zuboff, a Harvard emeritus professor. She called it surveillance capitalism. Right? So think about, I don't have my phone. So think about, you pull out your phone, right? Social media is mildly addictive, right? You're supposed to scroll. And all of that is actually what keeps you scrolling. Lies. This is an MIT study from 2018. Lies spread faster and further than facts. What else keeps you scrolling? Fear, anger, hatred, us against them. Multiply that, right? So more money comes in as you become more afraid, as you become more hateful, and it impacts us on many levels. Personally, right? Psychologically, sociologically, the second one, we behave differently in groups. And then finally, that last part, which we rarely talk about, is emergent human behavior. What kind of species behavior are we encouraging with this information ecosystem? It is the worst of who we are.
It is the worst of who we are. We are faced with some tumultuous times ahead because we quite literally don't have a solution for this. Our government is incapable of regulating this because 2 reasons. It does pose fascinating questions, and I use that word loosely, as it pertains to actual free speech. Are people free to lie to the detriment of humanity? Especially when those lies make the most money. But then 2, there's just too much money involved for there to be something done. There are too many lobbyists that are involved who would never allow actual legislation to fix this problem to be done, to be passed. Meanwhile, we're raising up a generation of children who were completely and totally immersed in a society that rewards the worst behavior. I've said this a long time about capitalism, period. The rewards that we give to greed would be the destruction of society. But we're well past that point because now we see what drives greed, what satisfied greed, what puts money in their pockets is fear, hatred, bigotry, and lies. Who knew that those evils would be the most profitable way of making money online in 2023? Patrons, stay tuned. Everyone else, if you want access to the next half hour, go to patreon.com/the BPD show. where you get twice the content, none of the commercial interruptions. If not, I'll see you tomorrow.